I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. My name is Alex, and this is the story of how I discovered that my girlfriend Meg had been unfaithful to me with my best friend Jim. The revelation shattered my world, leaving me lost and numb. It all began on an evening, nothing unusual about it, until Jim called me out of the blue asking if we could meet up. Jim was the kind of guy who didn't beat around the bush, but there was something different in his voice this time. Hesitation, maybe even guilt. I agreed, thinking he needed advice or just wanted to hang out. We met at our usual spot, a small bar tucked away in a quiet corner of town. As we sat down with our drinks, I noticed Jim wasn't his usual self. He fidgeted with his glass, avoiding eye contact, something I'd never seen him do before. My curiosity was piqued, but I had no idea what was coming. Jim finally broke the silence, his voice low and strained. "Alex, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been struggling with for a while." I nodded, urging him to continue, still unaware of the storm about to hit. I I slept with Meg," he said, his words like a punch to my gut. "It happened twice. We were both drunk, and it just happened." For a moment, I didn't process what he said. It was like my brain refused to comprehend the betrayal. When the words finally sank in, I felt a cold numbness wash over me. My heart pounded in my chest, but my body seemed frozen, unable to respond. I had always imagined that if I ever found out someone was with my girlfriend, I'd react with anger, maybe even violence. But there I was, sitting in silence, my mind racing but my body refusing to move. Jim went on, explaining how he thought it was a mistake, something he deeply regretted. He told me how Meg didn't seem to see it that way, how she hinted at wanting more whenever they were alone. The idea that she didn't see their actions as a mistake made my stomach churn. It was like she had been living a lie, and I had been a fool not to see it. "I couldn't keep it from you any longer, man. It's been eating me up inside," Jim continued, his voice trembling. "I know I've screwed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I couldn't let this go on. You needed to know the truth." I stared at him, my mind blank. I wanted to say something, anything, but no words came out. It was like my voice had been stolen, leaving me in this silent, agonizing limbo. Part of me wanted to lash out at him, to yell, to punch him, but another part of me was grateful. Grateful that at least he had the decency to confess, something Meg hadn't done. She had kept on with her charade, pretending everything was fine between us while she continued to betray me. Looking back, I realized that Jim's confession, painful as it was, saved me from a bigger lie. It forced me to confront a reality I had been blind to, a reality that would have continued to fester and grow, poisoning everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Meg. I'm not saying it was easy to forgive him. Hell, I don't even know if I ever fully will. But I appreciate that he came to me with the truth. In a twisted way, it was his way of making amends. But Meg, she never gave me that chance. She never admitted her betrayal, never showed any sign of guilt. She let Jim carry the weight of their actions while she went on as if nothing had happened. That's what hurt the most. Not just the betrayal itself, but the deceit, the pretense that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. After Jim's confession, I ended things with Meg. I couldn't look at her the same way, couldn't trust her. The relationship was over the moment I learned the truth, but the process of healing, that would take much longer. I spent weeks, months even, replaying everything in my mind, questioning everything I thought I knew. The numbness I felt that night eventually gave way to anger, then sadness, and finally acceptance. It's strange how betrayal can change you, how it can reshape the way you see the world and the people in it. I used to think I knew what I wanted, what I valued in a relationship. But after Meg, I wasn't so sure anymore. Trust had always been a given for me, something I never questioned. But now it felt fragile, like something that could be easily broken if I wasn't careful. Jim and I haven't spoken much since that night. We used to be close, inseparable even. But now there's a distance between us that I'm not sure we'll ever bridge. It's not just about what happened with Meg. It's about everything that came after. The silence, the awkwardness, the realization that things will never be the same. But I guess that's life. You live, you learn, and you move on. Some lessons are harder than others, and some scars take longer to heal, but you keep going. You have to. Because in the end, what else is there? That night changed me, changed my outlook on relationships, on trust, on friendship. It showed me that even the people closest to you can hurt you in ways you never imagined. But it also taught me something else, something I think I needed to learn. It taught me that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive the things that threaten to break me. And that, I think, is the silver lining in all of this. After Jim's confession, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. As much as it pained me, I had to confront Meg. I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine. Not after what I had learned. The betrayal was eating away at me, and I needed answers. But nothing could have prepared me for the conversation that followed. I met up with Meg at our apartment, the place we had shared so many memories together. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was where we had laughed, argued, and built our lives together, and now it was where everything would unravel. She greeted me with a smile, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "Hey, babe," she said, leaning in for a kiss. I pulled back, and her smile faltered. "We need to talk," I said, my voice strained. I could barely look at her. Her eyes narrowed, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What's going on, Alex?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Jim told me everything?" She blinked, confusion crossing her face. "What do you mean? What did he tell you?" "He told me about the two of you," I said, my words heavy with the weight of betrayal. "He told me how you slept together. Twice." For a moment, Meg just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, as if on cue, her face twisted into a look of shock and indignation. "What? That's not true. I never slept with Jim. He's lying to you, Alex." Her denial was immediate and vehement, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine or just a defense mechanism. My mind was spinning, trying to reconcile her words with what Jim had told me. Could he really have made it all up? But why would he? "Jim wouldn't lie about something like this," I said, my voice trembling. "He was the one who confessed to me. Why would he say it if it wasn't true?" "Because he wants to break us up," she shot back, her eyes flashing with anger. "He's been in love with me for years, Alex. He's jealous of what we have and wants to ruin it. He knows how much you mean to me, and he's trying to sabotage us." I was taken aback by her response. This wasn't what I had expected. I thought she might admit to a mistake, or at least try to explain herself. But instead, she was turning the blame onto Jim. Could it be true? Could Jim really be lying to me? "I don't know, Meg," I said, my voice wavering. "Jim seemed pretty sincere. He said you didn't even see it as a mistake, that you kept hinting at wanting more whenever you were alone together." Meg rolled her eyes, a look of disdain crossing her face. "Of course he would say that. He's trying to make me look like the bad guy here. But Alex, you know me. You know I would never do something like that to you." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was a nagging doubt in the back of my mind, a voice that kept telling me something wasn't right. And then there was the way Meg had always carried herself, like she was the center of the universe and everyone else was just orbiting around her. Meg was undeniably beautiful, the kind of girl who turned heads wherever she went, but she knew it too well. She was always aware of the attention she garnered, always confident that every man who looked her way was enamored with her. It was one of those things I had initially found charming, but now it seemed like a red flag I had ignored for too long. "Don't you see?" she continued, her tone almost pleading. "Jim has always had a thing for me. He's been trying to get between us for years, and now he thinks he can do it by making up lies. He's the one you should be angry with, not me." Her words were sharp, but they didn't cut through the fog of confusion clouding my mind. I was trying to piece everything together, but it felt like I was holding a puzzle with missing pieces. Could Jim really be that manipulative? Could Meg really be that innocent? But as she kept talking, something inside me shifted. I began to see through the facade she was putting up, the way she was twisting the narrative to suit her own needs. It was like a light had been switched on, and suddenly I could see Meg for who she really was. I thought back to all the times she had dismissed my concerns, All the times she had made me feel like I was the one overreacting whenever I caught her flirting with other guys. She had a way of turning everything around, of making herself the victim and everyone else the villain. And now, it was clear she was doing the same thing with Jim. Meg had always been self-absorbed, but I had chalked it up to confidence. Now I realized it was more than that. It was narcissism. She genuinely believed that she was irresistible, that every man who so much as glanced at her was in love with her, and she reveled in it. "Alex, you have to believe me," she said, her voice taking on a more desperate tone. "Jim is lying. He's trying to break us up because he wants me for himself." I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I saw was a girl who was more concerned with preserving her image than with the truth. She didn't care about what she had done or how it had affected me. She only cared about making sure she came out of this looking innocent. For the first time, I felt a surge of anger, not just at Jim, but at Meg too. Anger at the way she had played with my emotions, at the way she had taken advantage of my trust. She had fooled me into thinking she was someone she wasn't, and now that the truth was out, she was scrambling to cover her tracks. "Enough, Meg," I said, my voice cold and distant. "I've heard enough." She looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Alex, please." But I didn't let her finish. "I don't know who to believe right now, but I do know one thing. You're not the person I thought you were. Maybe Jim is lying, maybe he's not. But either way, I'm done with this. I'm done with you." Her face fell, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of genuine emotion. But it was too little, too late. The damage was done. I couldn't trust her anymore. Couldn't even stand to look at her. "Alex, please, we can work this out," she pleaded, but I shook my head. "No, Meg, I'm done. We're done." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, still trying to figure out how she had lost control of the situation. As I left, I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was still hurt, still angry, but at least I was free from the web of lies and deceit that had been suffocating me. Looking back, I realized now that Meg was never the person I wanted her to be. She was a selfish, egotistical woman who thrived on the attention of others, who believed she was entitled to anything and anyone she desired. It took me a while to see it, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got out before I wasted any more time on someone who didn't deserve me. Jim might have been wrong for what he did, but at least he was honest in the end. He gave me the truth, something Meg never did, and for that I'm grateful. It's funny how betrayal can reveal so much about a person, how it can strip away the layers and show you who they really are. As for Meg, she can go on believing whatever she wants, but I know the truth now. I know who she is, and I'm better off without her. I deserve better, and I won't settle for anything less ever again. After Jim's confession, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. As much as it pained me, I had to confront Meg. I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine, not after what I had learned. The betrayal was eating away at me, and I needed answers. But nothing could have prepared me for the conversation that followed. I met up with Meg at our apartment, the place we had shared so many memories together. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was where we had laughed, argued, and built our lives together, and now it was where everything would unravel. She greeted me with a smile, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "Hey, babe," she said, leaning in for a kiss. I pulled back, and her smile faltered. "We need to talk," I said, my voice strained. I could barely look at her. Her eyes narrowed, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What's going on, Alex?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Jim told me everything." She blinked, confusion crossing her face. "What do you mean? What did he tell you?" "He told me about the two of you," I said, my words heavy with the weight of betrayal. "He told me how you slept together. Twice." For a moment, Meg just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, as if on cue, her face twisted into a look of shock and indignation. "What? That's not true. I never slept with Jim. He's lying to you, Alex." Her denial was immediate and vehement, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine or just a defense mechanism. My mind was spinning, trying to reconcile her words with what Jim had told me. Could he really have made it all up? But why would he? "Jim wouldn't lie about something like this," I said, my voice trembling. He was the one who confessed to me. Why would he say it if it wasn't true? Because he wants to break us up, she shot back, her eyes flashing with anger. He's been in love with me for years, Alex. He's jealous of what we have and wants to ruin it. He knows how much you mean to me, and he's trying to sabotage us. I was taken aback by her response. This wasn't what I had expected. I thought she might admit to a mistake, or at least try to explain herself. But instead, she was turning the blame onto Jim. Could it be true? Could Jim really be lying to me? I don't know, Meg, I said, my voice wavering. Jim seemed pretty sincere. He said you didn't even see it as a mistake, that you kept hinting at wanting more whenever you were alone together. Meg rolled her eyes, a look of disdain crossing her face. Of course he would say that. He's trying to make me look like the bad guy here. But Alex, you know me. You know I would never do something like that to you. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was a nagging doubt in the back of my mind. A voice that kept telling me something wasn't right. And then there was the way Meg had always carried herself, like she was the center of the universe and everyone else was just orbiting around her. Meg was undeniably beautiful, the kind of girl who turned heads wherever she went. But she knew it too well. She was always aware of the attention she garnered, always confident that every man who looked her way was enamored with her. It was one of those things I had initially found charming, but now it seemed like a red flag I had ignored for too long. Don't you see? She continued, her tone almost pleading. Jim has always had a thing for me. He's been trying to get between us for years, and now he thinks he can do it by making up lies. He's the one you should be angry with, not me. Her words were sharp, but they didn't cut through the fog of confusion clouding my mind. I was trying to piece everything together, but it felt like I was holding a puzzle with missing pieces. Could Jim really be that manipulative? Could Meg really be that innocent? But as she kept talking, something inside me shifted. I began to see through the facade she was putting up, the way she was twisting the narrative to suit her own needs. It was like a light had been switched on, and suddenly I could see Meg for who she really was. And what I saw wasn't the monster I had started to imagine, but someone desperately trying to protect what we had. Someone who was flawed, yes, but human. Someone who might have been caught in a moment, confused, but who was trying to make things right. As she continued to speak, her voice breaking slightly, I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of losing me. The realization hit me hard. Meg was far from perfect, but so was I. We had our issues, but maybe those issues were worth working through, instead of throwing everything away. Alex, she said, her tone softer now, almost pleading, I know I'm not perfect. I know I can be selfish, and maybe even a little vain. But I love you. I don't want to lose you because of some stupid lies that Jim's telling. I need you to believe me. Please. I took a long, hard look at her, trying to see through the pain, the anger, the confusion. And what I saw was the girl I fell in love with, the girl who had been by my side through so much. Could I really throw all of that away? I don't know what to believe right now, I admitted, my voice shaky, but I do know that I don't want to lose you either. Her eyes welled up with tears and she stepped closer, cautiously reaching out to touch my hand. Then let's work through this together. Let's not let someone else's lies tear us apart. I hesitated for a moment, but then I nodded. Okay, Meg, let's work through this. And so, despite the doubts and the hurt, I chose to stay with her. Maybe it was the right decision, maybe it wasn't. Only time would tell. But for now, I knew that walking away wasn't something I was ready to do. We had too much history, too much love to just throw it all away. We would face whatever came our way, together. After everything that had happened between Meg and me, I thought we were finally on the path to healing. We had decided to stay together despite the doubts, despite the hurt. I wanted to believe that we could make it work, that the love we had was strong enough to survive even this. So when Christmas break came around, I was relieved. I figured the time away from school and the stress of finals would give us both a chance to reset. Little did I know, things were about to take a turn for the worse. My parents had planned a trip to visit some relatives over the holidays, and I decided to join them. It seemed like a good opportunity to get away from everything and clear my head. Meg, on the other hand, stayed behind at the campus. She told me there was a party planned for the few students who didn't go home for the holidays, and while she wanted to go, she promised she wouldn't stay long. She assured me she'd call later that night, and I trusted her. After all, we were working on rebuilding trust, weren't we? That evening, as I sat with my family in my aunt's living room, surrounded by the warm glow of Christmas lights and the comforting hum of holiday chatter, I found myself checking my phone more frequently than usual. It was getting late, and I hadn't heard from Meg. I sent her a quick text asking how the party was going, expecting a prompt reply. But minutes turned into hours, and still, nothing. I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. My mind started to race with possibilities, but I tried to push them aside. Maybe she just lost track of time. Maybe her phone died. There were a million innocent explanations, right? But as the night wore on and the texts and calls went unanswered, my anxiety grew. By the time I went to bed, I was filled with a gnawing sense of dread. Something didn't feel right, but I forced myself to believe that I was overreacting, that everything would be fine in the morning. The next day, I woke up early, hoping to find a message from Meg, an apology for not calling, an explanation for her silence. But my inbox was empty. I tried calling her again, but there was still no answer. I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. Trying to distract myself, I scrolled through social media, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was wrong. And then I saw it. On Snapchat, a guy I vaguely recognized, one of those people you see around campus but never really talk to, had posted a series of photos and videos from the party the night before. The first image stopped me cold. There, sitting on his lap, was Meg. She was laughing, a drink in her hand, looking completely at ease, like she didn't have a care in the world. My heart sank as I swiped through the story, each picture and video worse than the last. In one of the videos, they were both clearly drunk, stumbling over their words, slurring their speech. And then I heard her say it, those words that would be burned into my memory forever. "I'm going to fuck you." She said it so casually, so confidently, as if I didn't even exist. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My head was spinning, my chest tight with anger, hurt, and confusion. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. The Meg I knew, the Meg I loved, would never do something like this. But the evidence was right there, staring me in the face. I texted her again, my hands shaking as I typed, demanding an explanation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she called me. Her voice was shaky, on the verge of tears. "Alex, please. You have to understand," she began, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "I wasn't myself last night. I have a condition." I was too stunned to respond, so she kept talking, desperation creeping into her voice. "I have bipolar disorder, Alex. Sometimes I'm not me. I can't control it. That wasn't really me last night. It was the disorder." I sat there, my mind reeling. Bipolar disorder? This was the first I had heard of it. "Meg, why didn't you ever tell me about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She started crying, her sobs heavy and raw. "I didn't want you to know because I was afraid it would change the way you see me. I was scared it would push you away. I've been seeing a psychiatrist for a while now, but I didn't want it to affect our relationship. I didn't want you to think I was broken." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to be angry, wanted to accuse her of making excuses, but the pain in her voice, the way she was begging for me to understand, made it impossible. I had no idea what it was like to live with a condition like that. The thought of her struggling with something so serious, and all on her own, made my heart ache. "Meg, why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" I asked, feeling a mixture of hurt and sympathy. "Because I didn't want you to leave me," she cried. "I didn't want this to be the thing that tore us apart. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I can't. I know what I did was wrong, but I wasn't in control, Alex. Please believe me." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to hang up the phone and walk away from her and all the pain she had caused. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, couldn't do it. I couldn't leave her like this. Not if what she was saying was true. What kind of person would I be if I abandoned her because of a mental illness? Was I really willing to throw away everything we had because of something she might not have been able to control? Meg, I hesitated, my thoughts a tangled mess. I don't know what to think right now. This is a lot to take in. I know, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Alex. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you so much, and I hate that I've done this to us. But please, please don't leave me. I need you. Her words tore at me, and I found myself softening against my better judgment. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe it was the love I still felt for her. But I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Not yet. I'm not going anywhere, Meg, I finally said, my voice steadying. But we need to talk about this. Really talk about it. I need to understand what's going on with you. And you need to be honest with me, completely honest. No more secrets. I promise, Alex, she said, her voice thick with relief. I'll tell you everything. I'll be honest from now on. I just, I need you with me. And so, I decided to stay. I told myself that it was because I loved her, because I couldn't abandon her in her time of need. But there was a part of me that still wasn't sure, a part that wondered if I was making a huge mistake. Could I really trust her? Could I believe that her behavior was because of the disorder and not something more? In the days that followed, Meg and I had long, difficult conversations. She told me about her diagnosis, about the episodes she had been hiding from me, and about the medications she had been taking to manage it. It was hard to hear, hard to reconcile this new version of her with the girl I thought I knew so well. But I listened and I tried to understand. I told her how much it hurt to see those videos, how betrayed I felt. But I also told her that I wanted to help her, that I wanted to be there for her as long as she was honest with me going forward. She promised me she would be, that she would never hide anything from me again. We agreed to work through it together, to see a counselor, and to try to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at her, I saw those images from the party in my mind, and it made my stomach turn. But I pushed those thoughts away, convincing myself that it was the illness, not Meg, that had caused her to act that way. But even as I said it, I couldn't fully convince myself. There was still a part of me that doubted, that wondered if I was being naive, if I was letting love blind me to the truth. But I chose to believe her, because the alternative was too painful to bear. The thought of losing her, of being without her, was something I wasn't ready to face. So I stayed, and I hoped. I hoped that we could get through this, that we could come out stronger on the other side. I hoped that the Meg I loved was still in there, somewhere, and that we could find her again. Only time would tell if I was right. Summer had finally arrived, and with it came a much-needed break from the chaos of the past few months. After everything that had happened between Meg and me, I was looking forward to some time away from it all, hoping that a change of scenery might do us both some good. My parents had been eager to meet her, and so I invited Meg to spend the weekend at my family's house. It felt like the right step to take, a chance to move forward and introduce her to the people who meant the most to me. The plan was set. Meg would drive down on Saturday, stay with us for the weekend, and we'd spend a few days relaxing and enjoying each other's company. I was excited, but also a bit nervous. I wanted everything to go smoothly, to show my parents that Meg was someone special despite the rough patches we'd been through. A few days before the weekend, Meg called to let me know she was on her way. She mentioned that she'd be stopping by a friend's birthday party on the way. I didn't think much of it. After all, it was just a quick stop, and I trusted her. I told her to have fun and be careful on the road. Everything seemed fine, and I was looking forward to seeing her. Saturday afternoon arrived, and I waited by the window, watching for Meg's car to pull up. My parents were busy preparing the house, making sure everything was perfect for our guest. I was excited, eager to introduce Meg to my family, to let them see the person I cared so much about. But as the minutes turned into hours, I started to get a little worried. Meg hadn't called or texted since the night before, and I hadn't heard from her all day. I tried to push the worry aside, telling myself that she was just busy with her friend's party and would be on her way soon. But there was a small, nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite shake. Finally, just as the sun was beginning to set, Meg's car pulled into the driveway. I felt a wave of relief, but as soon as she stepped out of the car, my relief quickly turned to concern. She looked disheveled, her hair was a mess, and her clothes were slightly wrinkled. There was a dazed look in her eyes, and I could tell right away that she was still drunk, or at least severely hungover. I felt a wave of embarrassment. This wasn't the impression I wanted her to make on my parents. I had hoped for a pleasant, calm introduction, but instead I was faced with the challenge of getting her through the door without causing too much of a scene. My parents were standing by the door, their polite smiles masking the concern in their eyes. I quickly walked over to Meg, trying to maintain a cheerful demeanor. "Hey, Meg," I said, taking her bag and putting my arm around her to steady her. "You made it." She gave me a lazy smile, her eyes half closed. "Hi, Alex," she slurred, leaning into me more heavily than usual. "Missed you." The smell of alcohol on her breath was unmistakable. I felt a pang of guilt and embarrassment, knowing my parents would pick up on it too. I forced a smile, hoping to get her inside and out of sight as quickly as possible. "Mom, Dad, this is Meg," I said, trying to keep my voice light and casual. "She had a long drive, so I'm just going to help her get settled." My mom smiled warmly, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Of course, dear. Take your time." I nodded and quickly led Meg down the hallway to my old bedroom. Once inside, I sat her down on the bed. She flopped back onto the pillows with a contented sigh. "You okay?" I asked, kneeling beside the bed and brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "You look like you had quite a night." She giggled, a sound that would have been cute under different circumstances. "Yeah, it was fun," she mumbled, her words slurred and almost incomprehensible. "But I'm here now. With you." I sighed, realizing that a meaningful conversation was out of the question until she sobered up. I decided the best thing to do was to help her get some rest. I started to help her out of her jacket, intending to make her comfortable. But as I did, she suddenly grabbed the front of my shirt, pulling me closer. "Alex," she murmured, her hands fumbling with the buttons of my shirt, clearly indicating what she had in mind. "Wait, Meg," I said gently, trying to pull away. "You're not in any state for this right now. Let's just get you to bed, okay?" But she wasn't listening. Her grip tightened, and she tried to pull me down onto the bed with her. It was clear she wasn't taking no for an answer. And then, in the midst of it all, she whispered a name that made my blood run cold. "Alan," she breathed, her voice thick with intoxication. "I've missed you." I froze. The world around me seemed to stop as that name echoed in my mind. Alan? Who the hell was Alan? My heart pounded in my chest, a sick feeling rising in my stomach. For a moment, I just stared at her, unable to comprehend what I had just heard. "Who's Alan?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She blinked up at me, her expression confused. "What?" she mumbled, her words almost incoherent. You're Alex." But the damage was done. She might have corrected herself, but I couldn't unhear what she had said. Alan. The name hung in the air like a dark cloud, suffocating me with 1,000 questions I wasn't ready to face. Was this another guy? Was she seeing someone else behind my back? Or was this just the alcohol talking, some twisted mistake of her drunken mind? I pulled away from her, my heart racing with a mixture of confusion, anger, and hurt. "Who is Alan, Meg?" I demanded, my voice trembling. She just looked at me with bleary eyes, clearly not understanding the gravity of what she had said. She tried to pull me back, but I pushed her away gently but firmly. "Who is he, Meg? Why did you call me by that name?" But instead of answering, she just let out a soft, frustrated groan. And before I knew it, she had collapsed back onto the bed, her eyes already closing as she mumbled something I couldn't understand. Within seconds, she was asleep, leaving me standing there, staring at her as the weight of what had just happened crashed down on me. I wanted to shake her awake, to demand answers, but I knew it would be pointless. She was in no state to have this conversation, and I wasn't sure I could handle it either. So I did the only thing I could. I backed away from the bed, my mind reeling, and quietly left the room, closing the door softly behind me. As I walked back down the hallway, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The name Alan echoed in my mind like a haunting refrain, refusing to let me go. Who was this guy, and what did he mean to Meg? Was this just a slip of the tongue, a mistake made in her drunken state, or was it something more? My stomach churned with doubt and fear, the questions piling up faster than I could answer them. Back in the living room, my parents were sitting on the couch, their expressions carefully neutral. They must have sensed that something was wrong, but they didn't press me on it. "Is Meg okay?" my mom asked, her voice full of concern. "Yeah, she's just tired," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "She had a long night." My dad nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "If she needs anything, let us know." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, forcing a smile. "I think she just needs to sleep it off." They didn't ask any more questions, for which I was grateful. I sat down in the armchair opposite them, trying to join in the conversation, but my mind was elsewhere. All I could think about was the name Meg had whispered. Alan. Who was he? And why had she called me by his name? The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to distract myself by helping my mom with dinner, talking about trivial things with my dad, but nothing could shake the unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. I wanted to go back upstairs, to wake Meg up and demand the truth, but I knew I needed to wait until she was sober. That evening, after my parents had gone to bed, I finally returned to the bedroom. Meg was still asleep, curled up under the covers. She looked peaceful, innocent even, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself that everything was fine. But then I remembered the name, the way she had whispered it so intimately, and the doubt came rushing back. I sat on the edge of the bed watching her sleep and wondered what the hell I was supposed to do. Should I confront her? Should I let it go? My mind was a mess of conflicting emotions, anger, fear, confusion, and a deep, gnawing sadness. I had thought we were making progress, that we were moving past the issues that had plagued us for so long. But now everything was up in the air again. As I sat there lost in thought, Meg stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at me, her expression groggy but slowly becoming more alert. "Alex?" she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "Yeah, it's me," I replied, my voice tinged with the heaviness of everything I was holding back. She smiled sleepily, reaching out to touch my arm. "You're here. I'm so glad." I wanted to confront her, to ask her about the name she had called me earlier, but the words wouldn't come. She looked so vulnerable, so different from the girl who had been so reckless and careless just hours before. I didn't know what to think, what to believe. "Get some rest, Meg," I said finally, my voice soft. "We'll talk in the morning." She nodded, her eyes already closing again as she drifted back to sleep. I stayed there for a long time, watching her, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a lot more complicated. And as I finally left the room, heading back to my own bed, one question continued to haunt me. Who the hell was Alan? That evening, as the house settled into quiet, Meg finally woke up. I had been waiting for this moment, my mind racing with questions that had been haunting me since she called me by another man's name. The doubt and anger had been simmering beneath the surface all day, and now that she was awake, I was determined to get answers. Meg stirred in the bed, letting out a soft groan as she rubbed her temples. I could tell right away that she was battling a massive hangover. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the dim light in the room. When she saw me sitting at the edge of the bed, her expression shifted from grogginess to mild confusion. "Alex," she mumbled, her voice hoarse. "What time is it?" "It's late," I replied, my tone clipped. "We need to talk." She frowned, clearly trying to piece together the events that had led her here. "My head is killing me," she said, wincing as she pressed her fingers to her forehead. "What happened? I don't remember much." Her words ignited a spark of anger in me. I had been patient with her before, always willing to listen and forgive. But this time was different. This time I needed the truth, and I wasn't going to let her brush it off. "You don't remember?" I said, my voice sharp. "Do you remember calling me by someone else's name? Do you remember asking for Alan?" Meg's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment she looked genuinely frightened. "What? No, that's not possible. I don't know anyone named Alan," she stammered, sitting up in the bed. "I must have been out of it. I didn't mean anything by it, Alex, I swear." But her explanation wasn't enough this time. I had heard too many excuses, too many apologies. This was different. I had seen the way she said his name, the way it slipped out so naturally, so intimately, and I couldn't just let it go. "Don't lie to me, Meg," I snapped, my voice harsher than I had ever used with her before. "You called me by his name. Who is he? Is he someone you've been seeing? Are you cheating on me?" She recoiled at my words, her face paling. "No, no, Alex, I would never do that to you. You have to believe me. I don't know anyone named Alan. It must have been the alcohol, just some random name that came out of nowhere." But I wasn't buying it. Not this time. "Don't play games with me, Meg. I'm not stupid. You don't just call someone by a random name like that. Who is he?" She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I could see the fear behind them. "Alex, please, I don't know who Alan is. I don't know why I said that. You have to believe me. It's just a mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed, my voice rising. "A mistake that's happened before? Or was this the first time? How long have you been seeing him, Meg? How long have you been lying to me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let that stop me. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to let her off the hook so easily. I had been patient, understanding, forgiving, but this felt like a betrayal that cut deeper than anything before. "Please, Alex," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You have to believe me. I don't know anyone named Alan. I've never cheated on you. I love you. I don't want to lose you." Her words were desperate, but they didn't bring me any comfort. I could feel the frustration building inside me, the anger that had been simmering all day finally boiling over. I had trusted her, stood by her through everything, and now it felt like that trust had been shattered. "Then why did you say his name?" I demanded, my voice cold. "Why did it sound so familiar when you said it? If you're not cheating on me, then explain it. Make me believe you." She was crying now, her hands trembling as she reached out to me, but I pulled away, refusing to let her touch me. "Alex, I don't know. I don't know why I said that. I was drunk and I wasn't thinking. You have to believe me." But I didn't believe her. Not entirely. There was something about the way she had said his name, something that felt too real, too raw to be just a drunken slip of the tongue. And I wasn't going to let it go until I had the truth. "Who is Alan, Meg?" I repeated, my voice firm. "If you're not lying to me, then prove it. Tell me the truth." She shook her head, her tears falling freely now. "I am telling the truth. I don't know anyone by that name. I've never cheated on you. I don't know why this is happening. Please, Alex, you have to believe me." But I couldn't. The doubt was too strong, the fear too real. I had to know for sure, had to have some kind of explanation that made sense. And then, just when I thought the conversation couldn't get any worse, Meg said something that made my blood run cold. "Maybe, maybe I said it because it's part of my past," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Maybe it's something I've tried to forget, but it's still there, deep down. I don't know, Alex. I don't know." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. What was she saying? That Alan was someone from her past? Someone she had tried to forget? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was he an ex-boyfriend? Someone she had been involved with before we met? Or was it something even darker? Something she had been hiding from me all this time? "Your past?" I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "What do you mean, Meg? Who is he? What are you hiding from me?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear, and for a moment I thought she might finally tell me the truth. But instead, she just shook her head, her tears flowing faster. "I don't know, Alex. I don't know who he is. I don't remember. I'm sorry." Her apology felt hollow, meaningless. I had pushed her, demanded answers, and all I got was more confusion, more doubt. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Didn't know if I could trust anything she said. And as I stood there staring at the girl I thought I knew, I realized that the distance between us had never been greater. "I can't do this, Meg," I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. "I need to know the truth. I need to know who Alan is and why you said his name. I can't just ignore this." She reached out to me again, her voice pleading. "Alex, please don't leave me. I don't want to lose you. I love you. But I pulled away, the weight of her words and the doubt in my heart too much to bear. I need some time, Meg, I said, my voice shaking. I need to think. And with that, I turned and left the room, leaving her behind, still crying, still pleading for me to stay. But I couldn't. Not until I had the answers I so desperately needed. As I walked out of the house, the cool night air hit me, but it did little to clear my mind. I was filled with a deep sense of unease, a gnawing fear that the truth would be something I couldn't handle. And as I stood there, staring up at the stars, one question echoed in my mind, over and over again. Who was Alan? There are moments in life when you realize that everything you believed in was a lie. That moment came for me when Meg crossed every line, obliterating any sense of trust or honesty that might have remained between us. It wasn't just a breach of faith, it was a complete breakdown of reality as I knew it. After our tense confrontation the night before, I spent hours pacing, unable to sleep, replaying everything in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that Meg was hiding more than she was letting on. But nothing could have prepared me for what she would say next. The next morning, she approached me, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked fragile, broken even, but I wasn't in the mood for sympathy. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to let her off the hook this time. Alex, we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling. Talk? I replied, my tone flat and emotionless. What's left to talk about, Meg? I think you've said enough. She winced at my words, but she pressed on. I've been thinking about what happened, about why I said that name, why I called you Alan, and I think I know why. I crossed my arms, waiting for her to continue. I didn't know what kind of excuse she would come up with this time, but I was ready for anything, or so I thought. Alex, she began, her voice wavering, I think I might have Alzheimer's. For a moment, I just stared at her, too stunned to respond. Alzheimer's. The word hung in the air like a bad joke, something too absurd to take seriously. But Meg's expression was deadly serious. I've been having trouble remembering things, she continued, her voice shaking. There are gaps in my memory, entire days that I can't recall. I think that might be why I don't remember who Alan is, why I called you by his name. I felt a cold, sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Was she really going to try to use this as an excuse? Meg, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm, Alzheimer's is a serious disease. It doesn't just happen overnight, and it doesn't explain why you called me by another man's name. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know it sounds crazy, Alex, but I've been so scared, scared that something is wrong with me, that I'm losing my mind. I've been forgetting things, important things, and that's why I ended up with Alan. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? She hesitated, and I could see the fear in her eyes. At the party, she whispered, I didn't know who I was. I didn't remember you or us. I was confused, and Alan told me that he was my boyfriend. The room seemed to spin around me as her words sank in. And you believed him? I asked, my voice rising. You believed some random guy who told you he was your boyfriend? She nodded, looking down at the floor in shame. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared, and he was there. He took care of me, and we spent the night together. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, but instead of anger, something else bubbled up inside me. Laughter. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This had to be some kind of sick joke. I started to laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed through the room. Meg looked up at me, confused and hurt, but I couldn't stop. The absurdity of the situation, the sheer insanity of it all, was too much. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, until I could barely catch my breath. Alzheimer's, I choked out between laughs. That's your excuse. You forgot who your boyfriend was, so you just… What? Went along with whoever was convenient? Meg's lip quivered, and I could see the pain in her eyes, but I didn't care anymore. Alex, please, I'm telling the truth. I was scared and confused, and I didn't know what else to do. But I wasn't listening anymore. The laughter died away, leaving a cold, empty feeling in its wake. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I saw was a stranger, someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't want to know anymore. "You've lost your mind, Meg," I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. "Or maybe you've just lost your sense of decency. Either way, I'm done. I'm done believing your lies, done trying to make excuses for you. We're finished." She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Alex, no, please." But I didn't let her finish. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and final. "We're done. I don't want to hear any more excuses, any more lies, just go." For a moment, she just stood there, frozen in place, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Then slowly, she nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the words meant nothing to me anymore. Without another word, she turned and left, closing the door softly behind her. I stood there in silence, listening to the sound of her footsteps fading away, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. It was over. Whatever we had, whatever I thought we had, was gone. And strangely, I didn't feel sad or angry. I just felt free. As I sat down on the edge of the bed, I realized how much of a fool I had been, how long I had let myself believe in her lies, her manipulations. But now the fog had lifted, and I could see clearly for the first time in months. Meg was gone, and with her, all the confusion, the doubt, and the pain she had brought into my life. And as I sat there alone in the quiet room, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It was over. Finally, it was over. So that's the story of my first college love. It's funny how things turn out sometimes, isn't it? Looking back, it's almost hard to believe that it all happened the way it did. But here I am, sharing it with you, hoping it brought a bit of a smile to your face. If you're feeling any pity for me, don't. Really, there's no need. I don't feel anything for Meg anymore. Not anger, not bitterness, and certainly not a desire for revenge. The truth is, I think I've made my peace with it. Maybe I never really loved her in the first place. Or maybe I did, but it wasn't the kind of love that could survive the chaos that followed. Either way, I've moved on. It's strange, but I'm not haunted by the memories. I don't lie awake at night thinking about what could have been or what I should have done differently. I guess I was able to let go of the whole situation pretty easily, and for that, I'm grateful. Meg was a part of my life for a while, and now she's not. I've come to accept that some people are meant to be in your life only for a short time, to teach you something or help you grow, and then move on. And that's okay. That's life. So there you have it. My first college love, wrapped up in a whirlwind of confusion, laughter, and, in the end, a quiet sense of closure. I'm not sad about it, and I don't regret it. It's just a part of my story, one chapter in a much bigger book. Thanks for listening. It feels good to share it, to put it all out there. And who knows? Maybe someday I'll look back on this and laugh even harder than I do now.